All right, y'all, it's about 12 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. This is our first meeting post Barnsley. And so just a couple of things. First, thank you for those of you that were able to attend in person. I think there was a lot of value. I know the presentations were fantastic. The finance committee presentation was I learned a lot. I think just being able to build some relationships, or the start of relationships, is really good. So thank you for that. Gabby, I don't see numbers, so I can't tell if we have a quorum or not to get started. Or Liz.
Let's see.
Do you know how many you need? Oh, sorry.
Do we need to establish a quorum?
We're not voting on anything
Okay.
today, so I think we're good to just proceed with the business.
Okay, perfect.
On the wrong direction.
All right, thank you. So you did receive, Gabby sent the minutes out from our August meeting that we had in 2021, and then the follow-up meeting that we had at Barnsley. So can I get, if you've reviewed them, hopefully, can I get an approval for minutes for those?
So moved.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
This is Katrina
Thank
Kiefer.
you. Thanks, Katrina. Can I get a second?
Hi, Michelle. This is Sheila Bennett from Floyd. I'll
Thanks.
second the motion.
Thanks, Sheila. And any opposed? Any issues? Okay. All right. They are approved. Thank you. So just to do some introductions, you have your agenda in front of you. I'm not going to read that to you. But after we had our committee meeting in March, we really listened to the feedback of the group and the conversations that had both within the meeting we had, as well as conversations that just occurred naturally in follow-up. And there really were a number of priorities, and we wanted to align those with what the commission was also trying from a strategic standpoint to move forward. So I want to introduce, we have 4 co-chairs that will each, 2 of them will lead their own committee, and then we will have 2 that will be partnering on a committee as well. So I do want to introduce those. Katrina Kiefer, who is out of Augusta, the CEO out of Augusta, Francis, who is VP out of Wellstar, Amy, who is out of, Amy, I don't have my notes in front of you, is Effingham or Emmanuel? I don't know if she's on. She is on. Nope, maybe she's not. Okay, I apologize for that. I don't have those notes in front of me. And then Damien, who is also CEO. So I want to thank each of them for volunteering to participate in leading and being co-chairs for each of the work groups. And we have some really important work that needs to get done. And really the experts are all of you that participate day-to-day in the operations of your facilities, and truly can look at this from a business and strategic standpoint, and as well as folding in the day-to-day operations. So of those 3 work groups, we have 3 that we've decided on. Ooh, sorry.
You there, Maria?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can. Do you have the agenda in front of you? Because I just opened the meeting, but that was it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you, Roy, for doing that. So as everyone starts to join, hopefully the next meeting will be in person.
I can't mute Liz. Maybe you can. All right, perfect. Thank you for that. So back to the work group overview. Again, as I said, through the conversations with others, it was, we kind of leveled on 3 different areas that were focuses we heard amongst the group, as well as a big focus within the Trauma Commission that we knew we needed to really focus on, and also glean your understanding, your wisdom through that. So we do have 3 different work groups. And those 3 work groups, Katrina Kiefer, and we'll be having a partner with that one, will be focused on finance and our funding formulas, and really understanding what we need to be doing as health systems, at the same time making sure the commission is kind of the last funder versus the primary funding for institutions. And I think that start of that was the finance workshop that we had in March, really to help everyone understand where they should be from a health system level. And then this work group will help us more from a trauma commission level as well. The second work group will be led by Francis and Amy. And one of the things that we keenly heard loud and clear through COVID, particularly through COVID, but has been a long-standing problem in Georgia since I've been in Georgia for 22 years as a nurse. And as long as I've been a part of it, it's been a problem, is diversion and that word saturation that really isn't a legal term. And then what do we do around regional and state system needs? We had many cases, unfortunately, through COVID that some that went very well because there was some type of established process within a region or within an area, and then some that did not go as well because we did not have established processes, and people may not have had connections. If you're newer to Georgia, you may not know the people to call and who your connection needs to be. So we have some opportunities there, and really would like, from the trauma system standpoint, for you all to help support us through that and understanding where we need to move, and making sure that our patients can get to that definitive care as quickly as possible without delay. And since that is one of our key measures that we're focused on, it's of utmost importance. And then the third one, and Damien's going to help us lead that, is around rural education. I think I've used this quote, he probably doesn't realize this, about half a dozen times, that he said when we were at Barnsley, and he made the statement that it needs to be rural driven but urban supported. And that just, if you're not in a rural setting, then you don't always know. You can think you intuitively know what their needs are. And some of that's probably accurate, but there's a different layer when you add into the operations of what's actually occurring at each of those individual sites. So that will be the 3 work groups. I know we've already asked some feedback, but we will need to ensure that we define those work groups and ensure that everybody is participating on one. So hopefully you will be active partners in those work groups. I will be meeting with the work group, with the co-chairs of the groups, and then but they will be meeting with you all in between those times of when we meet every few months. So like to pause there. A lot of conversation or a lot of information shared about the co-chairs and the work groups, and would like to see if there's any questions from the group. Okay, with that, we're going to move forward. We're going to move to Liz, who's has a great presentation, although your brain will definitely work through this. It's great information that everyone needs to have knowledge of. So Liz, I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay, can you hear me okay, Michelle?
I can, yes.
We're trying to control our audio here. I actually have Regina Medeiros is in our office with us today. We're going over some contracts and grants stuff. So she's here as well. So we're all kind of in a conference room. So just wanted to make sure that you can hear us okay. I'm gonna introduce Jessica Story. Many of you have met Jessica. She was at Barnsley. And she's going to do a overview of our funding formulas as they currently exist. And as you said, Michelle, this group is going to be really key in taking a look at what we've been using, which has been in existence since around 2007 when the commission first started funding centers. So, and I think I mentioned to the group that preliminarily what we have found is that the funding formulas as they currently exist do actually, in fact, match up fairly well with what what our preliminary findings are from the readiness cost survey. So that's encouraging, but there may be some room to optimize. So to that end, I'd asked Jessica to put, and actually originally Jessica, I'd asked her to put together a slide because, to be honest, when we started reviewing this with Katie, Regina and I, we really couldn't understand how this was all done. So we asked Jessica to really break it down for us and, how do these formulas behave? And so I think what we have to do is get everybody on the same page first and understand what we're currently using. And then over time, and it might take us a good 12 months, even to 24 months to get to a point where we think we can make an honest appraisal of, is this working? Do there need to be any adjustments? And if so, what does that look like? So I will turn it over to Jessica, who works for Warren Averett, who is our third party auditor, who does come into your buildings annually to do your uncompensated care audit. Actually, I think now she does this virtually. But Jessica is going to take a little bit of a walk through what readiness and uncompensated care distribution, how we derive those numbers that go into your contract. So Jessica, see your PowerPoint is pulled up there if you want to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. As Liz mentioned, I'm Jessica Story. I'm a senior manager with Warren Averett, and we have been working with the commission for about 14 years now. And a lot of you know me through the testing that we do, validating uncompensated care, and also validating readiness cost. So the topic of our presentation today is to walk through the formulas that are used to allocate readiness and uncompensated care. Before we begin, I do want to have a little disclaimer and let you know that the examples that we're presenting today are just for illustration purposes. So the numbers and amounts, they are not actual amounts of funding. And we have rounded those to really just ease the illustration process. And also wanted to point out that Warren Averett was not involved in the creation of the formulas. But as Liz mentioned, the commission has engaged us to really just have a deep dive in understanding how the formulas work. So that is what I'm going to present today. And the way that the allocation process begins, it does begin with a general fund allocation budget. And that is determined at the state level. And of that budget, what funds are available to distribute to stakeholders? 80% of that is allocated to readiness and uncompensated care. And then 20% of that is allocated to EMS. And we can see that this is an example of what that budget looks like. So that amount that I was talking about, this available to stakeholder distribution here is the 12.6. That is the amount that is allocated 80% to uncompensated care and readiness. That total 80% is lowered by any kind of studies or any kind of, in this example, agreed upon procedures for testing of the uncompensated care. And again, as I mentioned, we're rounding. So in this example, we do have $10 million that is going to be allocated for readiness and uncompensated care distribution. So that 10 million is split evenly. 50% goes to readiness, 50% goes to uncompensated care. And in this example, that would be 5 million each. So the first allocation that we're going to look at is uncompensated care. It is distributed to level 1s and level 2 trauma centers, as well as burn centers. That is based on the number of qualifying uncompensated care claims, as well as the severity score of those claims. So this chart here shows the breakdown of how the severity categories are assigned. The next step in the process is to determine a total cost for all of the qualifying claims. And in order to be consistent and fair to all centers, a national cost norm is used to determine that total cost. And those cost norms are broken down between community centers and academic centers. And you can see in this chart, these are the national cost norms that are used in the formulas that are currently being used. That's broken down by the different levels of severity. And the way that the formula works is that a total cost by center is determined using those cost norms. So we take the cost norms in this example, this is a level 2. So the community cost norm amount is used in this example. So we have that cost norm multiplied by the number of qualifying claims in each severity category. So that comes down here. We see these totals, the 231,000 for basic, and then that gives us a total cost for this center of 1.3 million. So the next slide shows how those total costs are determined by each level based on the number of qualifying uncompensated care claims multiplied by the national cost norm. And so that gives us a total cost of $64 million. This is just used in order to figure out a percentage to be applied to each center to allocate their funding. So we'll see that on the next slide. We've determined a weighted percentage to allocate for each center based on their number of claims and severity score. So that percentage is used to calculate a total to be allocated to each center. So we've got the 5 million that was available for uncompensated care. That's multiplied by the individual center's percentage to calculate a total to distribute to that center. Does anyone have any questions on that? That is basically the uncompensated care allocation formula. It's pretty straightforward, but does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. If not, then I will move on to the readiness allocation. This one is a little bit not as intuitive as the uncompensated care. So please, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. And also there is a lot of words on these slides. A lot of this information is for you to be able to go back later and read through it to see, exactly how the calculations are working. We've got some summary slides that I'll kind of move to so that it illustrates these lots of numbers in a clearer form. But again, in this example, we are starting with the $5 million to allocate for readiness. Unlike uncompensated care, readiness is distributed to level 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and burn centers. So we're adding the level 3s and 4s to this calculation. The allocation does start with allocating to the level 3s and 4s a stipend. And in this example, level 3s receive a $50,000 stipend, and level 4s receive a $10,000 stipend. We'll move on to this next slide. It shows that a little better. So you have your level 4s with a total allocation based on that stipend. The stipend is broken down between what is considered a readiness payment and what is a potential performance-based payment. Level 4s, 19% of their total stipend is allocated to a potential performance-based payment. And then the remaining percentage is allocated to a readiness payment. So those two total the 10,000 here. For level 3 centers, 60% of their total readiness payment is allocated to a potential performance-based payment, and the remaining percentage is allocated to readiness payments. So again, in this example, we have 6 level 4 centers with a 10,000 stipend each. So that's 60,000 of our $5 million allocation going to level 4s. We have 5 centers as a level 3 with $50,000 in stipends. And so that's 250,000 allocated to level 3s. So in total here, we have a grand total of 310,000 that is initially allocated in the form of a stipend to level 4s and level 3 centers. And in terms of a percentage, that equates to 6.2% of the total $5 million that is allocated to level 4 and 3 centers. And so if we add these percentages up here, that gives us the 6.2% allocated to these levels. So the next part of this formula is probably the most complicated to understand. I'm going to try to break it down as simply as possible. But of the remaining left to allocate to the rest of the centers, that is going to leave us 93.8% of the total $5 million. And that's going to be allocated to level 1, 2, and burn. Again, in this example, that leaves us $4,690,000 left to allocate to those centers. The part that gets a little tricky here is that amount is not allocated evenly for those levels. Level 2 centers are allocated 60% of what level 1 centers are allocated, and burn centers are allocated 50% of what level 1 centers are allocated. So to break this down, we have to, calculate what does that mean. So I think this is pretty helpful. These boxes here that show we have, in this example, 6 level 1s, they're allocated 100%. We have 9 level 2s at 60% and 2 burn centers at 50%. So what we have to do is come up with a weighted number of centers. So instead of the 17 that we have actual centers, that has been weighted to leave us with 12.4 centers. And I do have a pie chart that I've created. Does it switch whenever I do this? Okay. So I think this kind of illustrates what that really means. So in this first picture, we have the 17 centers. And if we color code that to show the percentages that the centers receive by their level, we see that we have the 6 level 1s at 100%. We have the 9 level 2s at 60%. And the 2 burn centers at 50%. So if we put that all together, that's where we come up with the 12.4. This is the amount of centers that we're now using because those centers are not allocated evenly. Okay. So this again is the way that the calculations work with the remaining funds that are used, and using that weighted total number of centers of 12.4. In this example, again, there's 9 level 2 centers. They're allocated 60% each. So each of those level 2 centers will be allocated 4.84% of the remaining funds. So that gives us a total of $226,935 to allocate to each level 2 center. And here's what that looks like in the actual funding formula itself. Okay, so the next slide that we have is the allocation of level 1s. Since they have 100% of the 12.4 weighted number of centers, that gives us about 8.6% of the remaining funds to allocate to each level 1 center. And when I say remaining funds, I remember we've already given those stipends to the level 3s and 4s. So that's where that remaining funds number is coming from. So level 1s will receive $378,226 in this example. And here's what that looks like in the actual funding formula. So you'll see that each of the level 1s receive that same amount. Okay. And then lastly, we allocate to the burn centers, and their percentage is determined by 50% of the 12.4 centers. And so that percentage is 4.03%. That calculates out to $189.13 that is allocated to each burn center. And here's what the burn center looks like in the actual funding formula. You can see they receive the same amount. And then the last slide that we have, and let's see if I can make this just a little bigger so you can see it all. We can see how all of the levels are broken down. We have at the bottom our grand total of the 5 million that was available for the readiness piece. You can see that all of the level 4s received the $10,000 stipend, all the level 3s, the 50, and then the breakdown of the level 2s, 1s, and burns based on those weighted percentages. And that is the last slide that I have. I'm sure you all have questions. Is there anything that I can answer?
Jessica, this is Michelle. Just one question. On slide 7, you had the formulas and you said they were legacy norms for the cost payment, the actual, I can't think of what it was.
The national cost norms.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What are what year is that defined as?
This, I believe, began in 2008. I think that these norms have been used since then. But Michelle, we could really use any numbers in this amount because this is just used to calculate a total cost, which is, used to create a percentage to allocate to the centers. So those numbers, while they were initially used, several years ago, it doesn't really impact, what is allocated to the centers, if that makes sense. It's just, yeah.
Absolutely. I think what I was getting more towards is as we know that all of us on this call know that we are not, that the cost of trauma is a lot higher than it was 14 years ago. And so the ability to look at numbers and share the uncompensated care that we actually pay for outside of the money that we're able to get from the commission But just looking at the overall cost of trauma care, we know that what we have in Georgia that's funded is nowhere near the cost of what it costs to be prepared. And I know that Dr. Ashley and Liz and Regina and team did a great, that paper that was shared back in August, I believe. If you go back and take a look at that again, and I use this number a lot when I talk about trauma and finances. A level 1, for an example, is $10 million a year average cost in readiness. So just think about that as we're thinking about finance, and not just what we're doing with the dollars allocated today, but in the future, what can we do to increase that allocation? And that's the story that we tell, each of us tell within our institutions. And then if you have great government legislative folks like I do, that will preach this at the higher level. So thank you, Jessica. That was fantastic. Liz, I'll let you, I don't want to step in anymore, but if there's anything else you want to share around that.
I was just put a note in the chat box if anybody wants to pop your questions in the chat box. I know that is a lot of information, very dry. Jessica, you do a wonderful job with numbers. And the cost norms are something that, while they are based on older data, I think they do impact the actual distributions, the amount. So I would say to the group that's going to be working on this, one of the easy wins would be hopefully to try to get some more current information on cost norms. And, the more we look at this and publish on access and readiness costs and things, we might even have access to other things that can drive some of these determinants. And I know a lot of you probably walk away from this with questions that you come up with after this meeting. So I would encourage you to email them in to me and to Michelle, and we certainly have a follow-up. I've created another PowerPoint. We didn't want to make this be too heady of a meeting today. So I actually have how this applies to you and the actual funding distributions for last fiscal year that I was going to go over, but we kind of wanted to just do it in some small bites first, and then just take time to get everybody kind of up to speed on where we are. And I think that's about it, unless anybody has any other questions, Michelle.
All right. Yep. If you have any other questions, like you said, put them in chat. So the last thing we have today, and maybe give you a few minutes back into your day, is our committee meeting cadence. When we first met at Barnsley, we spoke of 2 in-person times a year we would meet, and then 2 virtual. And just so you're aware from a knowledge standpoint, February, early March, Barnsley, but in August, and we've been doing this for many, many years, we have an event at St. Simon's. And so many of us that we're down there. So originally we were going to have that one as an in-person as well, but trying to be cognizant of executives and time away and costs, we've decided that we would switch that to virtual. So we're actually going to have our virtual meeting in July, so that our next full committee meeting will be in July. In August, if you have the opportunity to come to St. Simon's with your team, it's a great few days. It's a great location at the King and Prince, and we just have a great time of getting to know folks and conversations and other things. And there's always great presentations and a lot of knowledge to be gained. So if you have the opportunity, but we are not mandating that, we'll have another virtual in October. In February, please go ahead and plan. It sounds like Barnsley might be the location, although that's not completely firmed up, I don't believe, Liz, although for some reason in the back of my head, I thought it was. And that will be in person, and then we'll meet again in June virtually. And that's just for this year. We're new, this is a newer group. Our priorities may shift, and the work that we're doing, that you all are doing, may shift how often we meet and whether we meet in person or not. I share with you, WebEx is always, or Zoom, whatever you're on, Teams is always a struggle to really gain consensus because you're not looking at people sometimes. So this may shift, but this is the calendar for the next year, just so you're aware, and we will firm up those dates. So Again, just want to thank you for your time today and for your time in March when we were at Barnsley. If there are any questions, like Liz said, please don't hesitate to shoot them out to myself or to her. And it looks like we will be sending out everything in here. She put that in the chat. And then Gabby, just a reminder for everyone that if you have not done your attendance, please click on that link and so you can get credit for being here. Next steps, the co-chairs and I will have some conversation about charter and purpose, and we'll go ahead and get our meetings kicked off for each of the work groups. So thank you for your participation and all of your support through this. Is there any last questions before we break? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Giving you a few minutes back in your day today. I hope everyone has a great rest of your Monday.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.